at the European pilgrimage site of Medjugorje, where Marian apparitions have been reported for decades.
Now she's here in America, so hopefully she can bless America too.
And a statue of Our Lady of Aparecida, the patron of Brazil, venerated by millions over the centuries, has now found a home in the United States. We take you to a joyous celebration. EWTN News in Depth starts now.
Voting is an exercise of moral action, right? So when we vote, we're exercising our moral responsibility.
How, as a Catholic voter, will you cast your 2024 ballot? The decision is upon us as we head into one of our country's most consequential elections. Welcome to EWTN News in Depth. I'm Catherine Hadro. We often hear that the presidential race heats up after Labor Day as the country barrels towards Election Day in early November. This year is certainly no exception, as the political rhetoric in the last few days and weeks has intensified to almost a fever pitch. We have even heard comments from Pope Francis on the American presidential election. Last Friday, during the papal press conference on his flight home from his Southeast Asia trip, the pontiff called both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump deficient on life issues, without directly saying their names.
Ambedue sono contro la vita.
Both are against life, whether it is the one who is chasing away migrants or the one that kills children. Both are against life. I cannot decide. I cannot say I am not an American and I will not be voting there.
But if you are a registered voter in the United States, you have the opportunity to cast your ballot. Early voting has already begun in some states leading up to Election Day on November 5th. With candidates who may not fulfill the criteria many Catholics pray for, how does a Catholic voter make decisions that align with their faith and conscience? In the next few minutes, we hope to bring you some enlightenment on that. Our EWTN News Election 2024 coverage begins with reporter Mark Irons.
Every election season, you'll hear all kinds of campaign ads and slogans, except perhaps this one.
We really need to call on the Holy Spirit for guidance.
Republican and Democratic candidates hope to sway voters to their side. But at the Maryland Catholic Conference, Executive Director Ginny Kraska has another hope for Catholic voters.
And really reflect on how does their faith inform who they're going to vote for, what they're going to vote for.
Every 4 years, Americans decide who will occupy the White House. The candidates make their pitch to voters. But for Catholics, listening to the wisdom of the church is even more important, so that when they cast their vote, it will be informed by truth.
Truth is not something I create. It's something I should receive. It's something outside of me.
Archbishop Thomas Winsky of Miami and all his brother bishops in communion with the Pope are successors to the apostles, those first followers who received teachings from Christ.
We believe that truth has a name, and that truth is a person, namely Jesus Christ, who said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life."
So if the church campaigns during election season, it's to remind voters of Christ-centered values. It's not the role of bishops across America or the people who work with them, like Ginny Kraska, to tell you who to vote for, but they will share this. In the Catholic tradition, responsible citizenship is a virtue, and participation in political life is a moral obligation. It's a quote from a teaching document put out by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops called Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship. Archbishop Winsky was part of the committee that helped form the document almost 2 decades ago. It includes Catholic doctrine expressed by popes and the Church Catechism and serves as a guide that can help American voters. The introduction states the document isn't about the ever-changing news cycle, but instead reflects the perennial role of the Church in public life in proclaiming timeless principles. Those principles make up Catholic social teaching. The bishops write, at the center of these truths is respect for the dignity of every person. This is the core of Catholic moral and social teaching.
We should be looking for the common good and not for personal self-interest.
Especially as it relates to the most vulnerable in our societies.
The virtuous subordination of my own passions to the good of the community.
Kenneth Craycraft is a professor of moral theology at Mount St. Mary's Seminary in Cincinnati. With theological reflections in his book, Citizens Yet Strangers, Living Authentically Catholic in a Divided America, Craycraft explains how Catholicism transcends partisan politics. He told us our civic lives shouldn't be reduced to political engagement, but as Catholics, we should consider what a vote represents.
It's also a witness of where we are in our own moral lives, and it's a witness to our own moral judgment, and ultimately, of course, it's a witness to the gospel.
Craycraft says the U.S. bishops provide important and helpful insights in forming consciences for faithful citizenship. They write, every human being has a right to life, the fundamental right that makes all other rights possible, and a right to access those things required for human decency, food and shelter, education and employment. The family is described as the first and fundamental unit of society, based on marriage between a man and a woman, and it should be defended and strengthened, not redefined, undermined, or further distorted. On religious liberty, the bishops write, in a fundamental way, the right to free expression of religious beliefs protects all other rights. The bishops hope Catholics will examine church principles alongside political candidates and their party platforms.
We do have to look at, the platforms and see how they measure up to what we believe as people of faith and what really advances the common good.
And in 2024, there are some major threats to the common good and human dignity. The bishops write, the threat of abortion remains our preeminent priority because it directly attacks our most vulnerable and voiceless brothers and sisters and destroys more than 1 million lives per year in our country alone.
Abortion is not a right, it's a wrong. It's a huge wrong.
And one, the bishops add, which some political actors mischaracterize as an issue of women's health. The bishops mention other grave threats to life and dignity, including euthanasia, gun violence, terrorism, the death penalty, and human trafficking, along with human cloning, in vitro fertilization, and the destruction of human embryos for research. They also share concerns about the redefinition of gender, lack of justice for the poor, the suffering of migrants and refugees, wars and famine around the world, racism, the need for greater access to health care, and care for our common home. At the state level, Catholic conferences, which can be found in most states, including the one we visited in Maryland, try to make sure all politicians on both sides of the aisle are aware of the concerns of the Church.
So here at the Maryland Catholic Conference, you're advocating for all kinds of issues. The Catholic Church is not just focused on issues that one party represents. Is that right?
That's correct. I think that makes us unique in a lot of ways, especially as a religious group. There are not very, if any, other groups that are seen as working across the aisle.
The bishops talk about abortion as the preeminent issue. How should Catholic voters understand that?
Issues that affect life need to take the forefront in how we think about voting. The foundational purpose of life. Without that, without the sanctity of life, we don't have some of these other issues. We can't talk about them fully. That's what I think they want us to understand.
Abortion is never morally acceptable and must always be opposed. The Church teaching is definitive. Craycraft says Catholics must also be attentive to those areas of prudential judgment. For example, immigration policy can be debated, but Catholics can't ignore the principles of Church teaching when they consider the issue.
Policy provisions that are open to prudential judgment, in some ways that makes it more incumbent upon us to think harder about those issues so that we are in conformity with the doctrine of the Church in terms of welcoming the immigrant and the stranger and so forth, as an example.
The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops website notes that a rich body of Church teaching has consistently reinforced our moral obligation to treat the stranger as we would treat Christ himself. Archbishop Winsky told us Catholics might notice the social teachings of the Church don't seem to fit in a partisan political box.
Oftentimes, as Catholics, we might feel politically homeless in either party because neither party really embraces the full gamut of Catholic social teachings.
As Catholics consider all their options, Craycraft says each person must pray and discern.
We can't vote for evil. We have to vote for good, even if it's the lesser good. And therefore, we might make a judgment that one candidate who is the lesser good is the better candidate of the major party candidates, or we might make a judgment that the only good vote that we can cast is for a third party candidate, a write-in candidate.
And whether it's voting or any other decision, the Church calls each person to be guided by a well-formed conscience. The bishops write, Catholics must also understand that if they fail to form their consciences in the light of the truths of the faith and the moral teachings of the Church, they can make erroneous judgments.
We have to form our consciences rightly, and for that we look to the teachings of the church, to the magisterium.
Mark Irons, EWTN News in Depth.
Joining us now to discuss how Catholics can better form their conscience so they can feel confident in their voting decisions, we welcome Colin Donovan, Vice President of Theology at EWTN, our own in-house expert. Colin has advanced degrees in sacred theology and is a frequent commentator on matters of Catholic faith and doctrine. He joins us now from our EWTN studios in Irondale. Colin, thanks for being here. Our conscience is our judgment of reason, according to the Catholic Catechism. Can you first explain what is our responsibility as the Catholic faithful to form our conscience, especially in light of carrying out the civic duty of voting?
Well, forming the conscience, of course, is a lifelong thing, and sadly many people don't do that. So we often need refreshers, and I think the election season is good, and that particularly excellent opening you had touched a lot of the important bases, such as the importance of life. Life is important as a non-negotiable issue, as Pope Benedict pointed out in an address in 2006. And as a non-negotiable issue, that means we cannot take life. It's gravely evil to take life. And I thought it interesting, Archbishop Wensky made the point that in dealing with people, of course, after they're born, if you kill them, they don't have any rights. But after they're born, we then have to continue to treat them with the dignity that they deserve. And it's interesting, of course, in the gospel, our Lord himself, says, what you do to the least of my brethren, you do to me. So a lot of these issues that we have, such as immigration, which was mentioned, such as the economy, what would a just economy provide for individuals in the family to prosper and flourish? A lot of these questions involve complex issues of, how much can we tax? What can the government do? What should individuals do? What should states and cities and families do? And so those are negotiable issues that can be discussed politically between the voter and their elected representatives, to how to respect the dignity of individuals in all of these complex social questions. But whether an individual has life or not, that's a non-negotiable. Whether the family, the marriage of a man and a woman and the children that come from that have life, the respect, and even the support and advance of the state, that's not a negotiable. And anything against it means that that is morally wrong to support things that are contrary to that. Or, as was mentioned, religious liberty. Religious liberty has been called the first liberty in American discourse, because from those conscience rights, the right to think, the right to believe, the right to teach others, your children, what you believe, the right to debate and associate with others over political, all of these freedoms flow from that first freedom, that natural freedom that parents have to teach their children. And so wherever any of these three things are countered, we can say that evil is being done. And we need to support those three areas, and in the other political policy battles, to bring those into play as well, and in favor of the social good which the Church identifies.
Colin, so we've talked about we have this responsibility to form our conscience, but going to a very fundamental question, how does one go about forming his or her conscience? What does that entail, and does it mean having to read the catechism cover to cover?
No, because I think it was mentioned the Bishops' Conference has the Faithful Citizenship document. There's a summary of what the Church is teaching regarding our social responsibilities, our political responsibilities. That would be a good place to start. Certainly watching programs like yours or other EWTN programs and radio shows. These issues are being discussed. This is a way to learn what the Church teaches. We're only trying to convey that truth, not to tell people how to vote. So what people can do is inform themselves from the many faithful sources that are out there, beginning with the Church itself, and particularly our Bishops' Conference document, Faithful Citizenship.
You've already given some practical tips, and I understand that forming one's conscience is a lifelong task. But in the context of the U.S. presidential election, which is a month and a half away, are there more practical tips a viewer can do starting now? Are there other documents you might recommend?
Sure. Well, they can go to EWTN.com/vote, and there I've put a lot of information regarding the different subject matter, regarding what a conscience is, what prudential judgment is from church teaching, from the fathers and doctors of the church. That would be a way to inform yourself. I know the Register is coming out with a voter's guide. I believe EWTN News also will have one. So these are the kinds of sources to make sure that they are faithful to church teaching and that they're trying to explain that teaching, especially to those who maybe have never encountered certain things. And you could go endlessly into depth on it, but unfortunately in the time that's available, it means looking at the most important issues: life, marriage and family, and liberty. Where those are under attack, the tradition has called people who would do that enemies of religion and morality. And there can even be an obligation to vote against them, because allowing them to come to power would then be your responsibility if you did not. So I don't know if we live in such a time, but certainly people historically can say, well, here were times in history where the questions of liberty, and especially of religious liberty and of life and of marriage, have been at issue before, and they weren't stood up for. And it's only by standing up for them that our way of Christian life and our way of life as Americans will ultimately be protected.
Colin, in our remaining time, I do want to get your reaction to something. Pope Francis recently addressed how specifically American voters will need to vote their conscience this upcoming election day. Let's take a listen.
Generally, it is said that not voting is bad. It is not good. You must vote, and you must choose the lesser evil. Who is the lesser evil? That lady or that gentleman? I don't know. Everyone in conscience has to think about it and do this. Make a choice.
Colin, we have just about a minute left, but when we are discerning voting matters, what does Pope Francis mean by choosing the lesser evil?
Well, it goes back to the point I was just making about particular candidates that would be very problematic. And that is, we have to choose the pathway which minimizes the evil. And in doing that, we're not voting for the evil that the candidate we ultimately vote for might do, because everybody's imperfect, but we're voting to stop a greater evil that would be done if that individual were elected. And again, those three areas of life, the area of marriage and family, and the marriage area of parental rights and liberty rights in general, those give us the areas by which we measure the governing policies and person and of what character, if you will, of the candidates. And so those three areas should be used to find out overall which candidate in a particular race is the lesser of the evils.
Colin Donovan, so grateful for your expertise, especially this week. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Colin has been integral to the development of this year's EWTN voter guide, which he mentioned, particularly in the discussion of Catholic formation of conscience. It covers the 7 pillars on issues ranging from abortion and life to immigration to foreign policy to the economy, and includes commentary from Colin as well as from Father Robert Spitzer. It is now available on the website of our sister publication, the National Catholic Register, at ncregister.com. We hope you will find it useful as you make your voting decisions. There is much more ahead on this edition of EWTN News in Depth. Stay right there.
It's my 3rd time here, and each time I come, I feel like I really want to come back. So every time I leave, I'm like, when will I come back? It's the most peaceful place on earth.
A place of pilgrimage for millions of people. The European village of Medjugorje, site of alleged visions of the Virgin Mary. This week, the Vatican made an important announcement on what the Catholic faithful should make of the alleged Marian apparitions at Medjugorje. We discussed the decision with our panel of Marian experts.
The response of the Brazilian community from all over the country, it's very, very moving.
And Brazilians' devotion to Our Lady is embraced in Washington, D.C., with the placing of a statue of Our Lady of Aparecida during a dedication ceremony at the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. EWTN News in Depth is coming right back.
in a pivotal moment. The world is in tremendous need as society is sharply divided along political and ideological lines. As the elections draw near, this is becoming more apparent. That's where EWTN News steps in. Unlike other media outlets, we're grounded in truth, not the changing ideas of the world. We frame our stories and commentary on the rock of the gospel. And we work hard daily to ensure we provide high-quality news you can trust. This coverage is possible because people like you have stepped forward. With the support of you, our EWTN family, we've opened a new studio in Washington and hired more journalists and producers. With these additions, we're expanding our coverage this election cycle, including extended election night coverage, national and statewide polling, and a voter's guide. But there's more work to be done. So today, I ask for two favors. Will you join us to pray for the nation, that we all understand we are one nation under God? Also, will you make a gift so we can share news with more people? Your support will advance the truth worldwide. Thank you, and may God bless you.
EWTN is 100% viewer supported. Your gift today helps keep EWTN on the air, shares the joy of the gospel, and helps broadcast news from a Catholic perspective. Please make a gift by going to EWTN.com/PrayUSA. You may also call us at 1-800-447-EWTN or send your donation to EWTN, 5817 Old Leeds Road, Irondale, Alabama, 35210.
The faithful are authorized to give their prudent adherence to this phenomenon. The faithful can receive a positive stimulus from their Christian life through this spiritual proposal. And public worship is also authorized. That is, public worship of Mary, Queen of Peace, is authorized.
An important pronouncement on Thursday from the Vatican as the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith endorsed continued devotion to Mary in Medjugorje, a popular Bosnian pilgrimage site in Southeast Europe. Alleged apparitions of the Blessed Mother have been reported there since 1981, and millions have visited over the decades. While the Vatican Doctrinal Office endorsed Medjugorje as a place of great spiritual peace from which abundant good fruits have come, the highly anticipated report withheld any definitive judgment on the supernatural authenticity of the alleged apparitions, unlike those declared authentic in the more well-known and established Catholic sanctuaries at Fatima or Lourdes. Over the years, the Vatican and some local bishops have cast some doubt on the reliability and motivations of some of the 6 original visionaries who first reported the Marian apparitions when they were young adults. Skeptics have questioned whether the visionaries' claim to continued daily apparitions and some of the messages they say came from the Blessed Mother have been driven by economic considerations. But our EWTN colleague Hannah Brockhouse, who covered Thursday's news conference for Catholic News Agency, says despite those concerns, the Vatican report explicitly acknowledges the deep spiritual experience of many who visit Medjugorje.
I think there could be some disappointment for people who are strongly devoted to Medjugorje and to Our Lady. However, this report overall was a very strong endorsement from the Vatican. I would say the strongest yet, of devotion to the place, of the permission for pilgrimages, as well as the reading of the messages, the alleged messages from Our Lady that the Vatican has described as edifying.
Based on the report, Hannah said in the future it does not seem likely the Vatican will be making many pronouncements on the supernatural characteristics of alleged apparitions, but will focus instead on the pastoral qualities of a shrine or place of pilgrimage. The years-long uncertainty over whether the Vatican would approve of public devotion to Our Lady at Medjugorje did not stop vast numbers of pilgrims from descending upon this small European village in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
This rocky hilltop in southwestern Bosnia attracts pilgrims from around the world. It's estimated more than 1 million people travel each year to Medjugorje. People young and old. Some carried atop the stony hill looking for healing.
The feeling cannot be described to someone who hasn't experienced it. To understand it, you must experience it.
I have come before too, but now that I am old, it means even more to me because I do not think that I'll live much longer.
Medjugorje has been a source of both controversy and reported conversion for decades. In 1981, 6 young people in Medjugorje, a town that's in present-day Bosnia-Herzegovina, began to experience what they claim were apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Here's one of the alleged visionaries in a 1995 interview.
I was pinned down, not here, with my friend Ivanka, and we saw one lady in a long green dress taking baby in the hand.
The alleged visionaries say the apparitions conveyed a message of peace for the world, a call to conversion, prayer, and fasting, as well as certain secrets surrounding events to be fulfilled in the future. For decades, the apparitions were said to have continued on almost daily. In this 1996 interview, alleged visionary Vika Ivankovic Mijatovic says each apparition is a joy.
Really, every day when I see the lady, it is a new joy. Even after 15 years of her appearances, it gets better and better.
3 of the 6 visionaries say they continue to receive apparitions each afternoon because not all of the secrets intended for them have been revealed yet. As the Catholic Church continues to navigate Medjugorje, pilgrims seeking healing and answered prayers are almost certain to continue traveling to the remote hilltop.
We have 2 experts on Marian apparitions here now to discuss Medjugorje and the significance of this week's Vatican announcement. Dr. Gloria Falcão-Dodd is president of the Mariological Society of America and a research professor for the International Marian Research Institute at the University of Dayton. And Michael O'Neill is the creator of the popular miracle tracking website miraclehunter.com, creator and host of the EWTN docuseries They Might Be Saints, and author of Science and the Miraculous: How the Church Investigates the Supernatural. Thank you both for being here. Dr. Dodd, I want to come to you first. Can you further break down the key parts of this Vatican announcement on Medjugorje? What does it mean? What does it not mean?
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, there are actually some very important points that are made by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. They noted that there are many spiritual fruits and positive messages that prompted the evaluation of the spiritual phenomenon or experience of Medjugorje to be given the ranking of nihil obstat, meaning that nothing stands in the way for this adherence to follow these messages. Although it's interesting, they then go on to qualify that by saying that there are some necessary clarifications that need to be made. So they say all are invited to appreciate and to share the pastoral benefits of this alleged apparition, but at the same time to have discernment and guidance with some of the messages that have some mistakes out of the subjective perception, so that the bishop can give guidance for that.
And we'll get into those necessary clarifications shortly. But first, Michael, can you explain the unique nature of the alleged apparitions in Medjugorje? I mean, typically we hear of Marian apparitions having a start date and an end date, but these alleged apparitions have been ongoing since 1981. Can you explain that and what the message of Medjugorje is?
Well, I think these apparitions seem to be somewhat unique as far as modern apparitions. There was a long-running case of apparitions from 1664 in Les Lots in France with Benedicta Rencourel. And in Kabeho, Rwanda, there were numerous messages, but by far, the typical Marian apparition might last 3 months and only have a handful of messages. So it's quite different. And the idea that there are 6 visionaries receiving all these messages is quite different. In most cases, it's a much smaller number. That being said, we can look at the messages of Medjugorje, and the thing that the Vatican is encouraging and promoting and approving is the prayer, the fasting, the connection with Mary. that these apparitions have encouraged. So I think this is a big moment in the history of the church. Perhaps this is the biggest announcement since the Fatima secret was acknowledged in the in that press conference years ago.
Wow. Dr. Dodd, you mentioned how the Vatican note on Medjugorje addresses what it says are necessary clarifications. What should we know about what the Vatican said there?
Well, actually, sections 27 to 37 of the document identified 6 possible confusion points. And so they addressed that reprimands or threats that Our Lady will stop appearing are to be, if her messages are not heeded, are to be understood in the sense of an urgent call to conversion. Also, alleged messages for the parish are to be understood as expressions of the visionaries' intense love for their parish community, and that they are subject to the pastor's guidance. The relentless insistence on listening to the messages they describe as being prompted from the love and generous fervor of the alleged missionaries who, with goodwill, feared that the Blessed Mother's calls for conversion and peace would be ignored. And also misleading statements, such as the date of Our Lady's birthday on August 5th, and the instruction not to work for 3 days prior to that are simply to be ignored.
Thank you for providing that context. Michael, were you surprised by the Vatican's cautious green light of Medjugorje? And can you put it into context of Pope Francis's previous comments on the apparitions and how it stems from the Vatican's new document on alleged supernatural phenomena?
Well, we've seen Pope Francis not necessarily embracing these messages with open arms in the past. I think on May 14th, 2017, on the plane ride back from Fatima, he gave some comments that urged caution with these messages and reflected his own view, saying that he doesn't see Mary as a postmaster delivering messages every day. He likes to think of her as mother. So we've seen these comments like that from the Pope, where it kind of tipped his hand as to what he was thinking. So to see this approval of nihil obstat was somewhat surprising from that point of view. However, when you consider this May 17th new norms for discerning alleged private revelation that has come out, the highest level of approval is nihil obstat, meaning nothing obstructs. And so there wasn't even the possibility that Pope Francis and the DDF could go forward with an approval of supernaturality. And in the question and answer section of the press conference, somebody asked the question, is it possible that in the future, Pope Francis could, in fact, approve this as supernatural? And the answer from Cardinal Fernandez was definitely not. The nihil obstat is sufficient. So we can't expect to see anything further coming forward from Rome on this.
Dr. Dodd, the alleged visionaries say that Our Lady appears to them identifying as Queen of Peace. How significant is that title, and what did the Vatican have to say about that title of Our Lady?
Well, the document notes that Queen of Peace is the most original title that Our Lady is allegedly describing herself as. And they described it as a very positive understanding of peace. It's not just the absence of war, but rather a peace with God, with your neighbor, with your community, a peace that is shown forth in good works and love for others. So they were very positive about this promotion of the title of Our Lady as Queen of Peace.
Michael, on a very practical note, I think our viewers would be interested to know this. What does this Vatican announcement mean for the faithful who want to make a pilgrimage to Medjugorje, and for people who say they've had profound, deeply beautiful and spiritual experiences there?
Well, to be honest, one day after this announcement was made and one day before this announcement was made, not much has really changed. We've seen the Vatican supporting this through the apostolic administrator present there in Medjugorje. We've seen the Pope leaving messages for the great crowds that come there for the Youth Day. So we've seen Vatican support of this already. However, since 1981, there has been no document that's ever shown any sign of approval from Rome. So this is a big moment from that point of view. As far as the faithful go, they can go there on pilgrimage. There is a discouragement, however, from seeking out the visionaries, because the visionaries' moral life is not to be considered in this approval of nihil obstat. And there should be, as far as the messages go, there should be attention and caution given in interpreting and disseminating the alleged messages. That's from the document itself. So I think that's an important facet, that they're not asking the faithful to look at the messages in the same way that might have been in the past. So those slight differences are what's different between today and 2 days ago.
Dr. Dodd, the Vatican highlighted the large number of fruits that have come from Medjugorje, conversions, frequent return to the sacraments, many vocations, and more. How critical are discerning these good fruits as the Church continues to navigate these alleged apparitions?
Well, it's absolutely crucial because it's a biblical principle. It comes from Jesus Christ himself in Matthew chapter 7, verses 15 to 20, in which Jesus describes that you will know the difference between a true prophet and a false prophet by their fruits. So a good prophet has good fruits, and a false prophet has bad fruits. So this is absolutely key to the discernment of the entire phenomenon of Medjugorje, that the good fruits are why it is given the highest possible ranking of nihil obstat.
That's a great clarification. And Michael, as someone who tracks and monitors Marian apparitions and other supernatural phenomena in the Church, what do you want to leave our viewers with? What should they take away from this Vatican announcement, and how Medjugorje maybe compares to Fatima and Lourdes, for example?
Well, I think this is a big moment in the history of the Church. This is a long-running apparition since 1981, as we talked about. And I think this approval is important because it allows the faithful who have this devotion to Our Lady of Medjugorje, Queen of Peace, can now go there with Vatican recognition of this. And so I think it's an important moment. And of course, when we talk about the great pantheon of Marian apparitions, we talk about Fatima, Lourdes, Guadalupe. And for modern people who are interested in miracles and Marian apparitions, this now elevates Medjugorje to that list. But however, the caveat must be made that it is not considered a supernatural event, at least at this point. But it's a big moment in the history of the Church.
A big moment indeed, and we're so grateful to have you both with us this week. Dr. Dodd and Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Up next, the long legal saga continues for Jimmy Lai, the champion of democracy in Hong Kong, now imprisoned almost 4 years for his criticism of the Chinese Communist Party. As he faces trial this fall, a new plea to Washington lawmakers to help secure his freedom. His son, Sebastian Lai, joins us in studio next to tell us about that and to give us an update about his father's life behind bars. We'll be right back.
I think every single person is called by God with a purpose. And so the question then becomes, how do we live out our purpose? The mission of the Lila Rose Show is to bring people together where we can discover how can we live the most beautiful and fulfilling lives, how to have the healthiest relationships, how to discover wellness, and then go on a deeper journey in our faith to draw closer to God so that we're able to, together, live lives that are flourishing.
Almost 4 years ago, Hong Kong activist and devout Catholic Jimmy Lai was imprisoned in Hong Kong for his pro-democracy work. His son traveled to Washington this week to ask lawmakers to put more pressure on China's government to free him before it's too late. Founder of the pro-democracy Hong Kong newspaper Apple Daily, Lai has been vocal in his criticism of China's authoritarian government. He is currently in the middle of what many have called a show trial over his activism. After numerous pauses, his months-long trial will begin again in November. But until then, the 76-year-old Catholic remains in solitary confinement, with reports he's being denied proper medical care and even Holy Communion. His son, Sebastian, joins us in studio to discuss Lai's work, the role of his Catholic faith, and why quick action on his release is more important than ever. Sebastian Lai, we are so grateful to be speaking with you today about your father. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Your father is on trial under Hong Kong's national security law. For those not familiar with that law and with this case, why has your father been imprisoned?
Yeah, so the national security law was passed as a consequence of the 2019 pro-democracy protests. And it was essentially a law to criminalize all pro-democracy expressions. My father, for the last 30 years, has used his newspaper and his resources to campaign for democracy. He knew that in the end of the day, freedom mattered much more than having an additional zero to your net worth. And he was always a thorn on the government side. He was always someone who held the powerful to account with his journalism, with his campaigning. Mm-hmm. And when they passed the national security law, they used that as a means, as an excuse to arrest him.
To that point, your father is nearly 77. He's been in prison for more than 3.5 years. There are reports that he's being denied independent medical care. We know he suffers from diabetes. How is his health? What do we know? So,
it really breaks my heart because he's been in jail for almost 4 years now, but he's held in solitary confinement. He's being denied all sunlight. Solitary confinement is 23 hours and 10 minutes a day, and Hong Kong goes up to around 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer, if not more, very humid, and he doesn't have air conditioning, so he's almost being baked alive, and so as you can imagine, for someone who's almost 77, his health has gone down quite a bit. He recently couldn't even go to trial because of how sick he was. It really is vindictive because of his belief, because of what he stood for. The government is punishing him, torturing him for that. And I'll give you another example. Mm-hmm. He was recently denied communion because he is a very devout Catholic. When you're by yourself in solitary confinement, it really is just between you and God in some sense. And they know that, and they want to weaken his faith, and they know how important communion is, and they've denied it to him.
Can you expand on that? How has your father's Catholic faith sustained him through this trial?
It's been a pillar. It's kept him. I think it's kept him strong, mm-hmm. Mentally, and it's kept him sane. I have met a lot of people who say they're praying for my father, I'm incredibly moved by that, because I know that he would also be incredibly moved by that, to know that even though he is in solitary confinement, even though the government tells him that nobody cares about him, that he is just by himself, that there are people praying for him, and there are people telling him through their prayers that he is not alone, and he does not suffer alone.
Mm. Your father's international legal team just recently submitted an urgent appeal to the United Nations Special Rapporteur on torture and inhuman and degrading treatment, and it highlights your father's prolonged detention and solitary confinement. As you mentioned earlier, he's held in his cell 23 hours and 10 minutes each and every single day. What more can you tell us about this appeal to the UN, and what action do you want to see be taken?
So, I would like the UN to put a lot of pressure, to ramp up the pressure on the Hong Kong government, to tell them that this is absolutely unacceptable. This is this is akin to torture, and push to see my father released. Really tell the Hong Kong government that what they are doing to my father is a travesty.
Sebastian, why is this case important to our global Catholic audience? Why should we be paying attention?
He did the right thing despite knowing that there could be very real threats to his life. He campaigned for democracy for the last 30 years. He knew that he was doing it because there is such thing as right or wrong, and that he was on the side of what is right. And then when the national security law came down, when everybody around him told him that he had to leave because he was one of he was one of the main targets, he knew the responsibility he had to his journalists, to the other pro-democracy campaigners. He knew that if he could have left, but a lot of people might not be able to leave, and he stayed in Hong Kong to defend them, to act as a shield and as a lightning rod, because he believed that if he was there, a lot of the attention of the government will be focused on him, and will allow a lot of people to leave, to at least be a bit safer. And so, like, the values he stands for are values that we as Catholic not only want to see more in the world, but are values that we are proud of.
Finally, Sebastian, I mean, you've traveled here to the U.S., to our nation's capital this week. You've testified this week at a Senate Special Committee hearing all the way from Taipei in Taiwan. What's your goal? What do you want our audience to know?
That my father needs to be saved. He is, because of his age, he could, and the deterioration of his health, he could die anytime behind bars. And so I'm here in Washington to raise attention to his case, but to also ask the U.S. government, who have been very supportive, to up the pressure on Hong Kong, to tell them that there's no benefit in having a man like my father, a man like Jimmy Lai, die in jail. And hopefully through all this pressure, we will save him. We will see him free.
Sebastian Lai, God bless you, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
News headlines are next in the Week in Review. Major economic news tops the Week in Review. For the first time in 4 years since the COVID pandemic, the Federal Reserve has cut its benchmark interest rate, signaling its belief that inflation is now on the decline and under control. The cut was an unusually large half point, a dramatic shift after 2 years of high rates, which made borrowing painfully expensive for consumers. Many Americans have been upset with high prices for groceries, rent, and other necessities. But the rate cuts will mean over time lower borrowing costs for mortgages, auto loans, and credit cards, which will boost Americans' finances and support more spending and growth. The rate cuts also reflect the Fed's new focus on bolstering the job market.
The labor market is actually in solid condition, and our intention with our policy move today is to keep it there. You can say that about the whole economy. The U.S. economy is in good shape. It's growing at a solid pace. Inflation is coming down. The labor market is in a strong pace. We want to keep it there. That's what we're doing.
The Fed's policymakers signaled they expect to further cut rates by an additional half point in their final 2 meetings this year, with more cuts to follow next year. On Thursday, a day after the interest rate cut, U.S. stocks soared to record heights. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed above the 42,000 level for the first time amid growing optimism that the Federal Reserve's move will deliver a soft landing for the U.S. economy. Polling shows the economy continues to be the top concern of the majority of American voters as we draw closer to the presidential election. Of course, we talked about the Catholic vote at the top of this program. A new poll released Friday from the Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs Research is a poll of the general population. Conducted last weekend, the poll shows about 8 in 10 voters consider the economy one of the most important issues in this election. Going into November's election, it also shows neither Kamala Harris nor Donald Trump has a decisive edge with the public on the economy, a topic that was once a clear advantage for Trump. A smaller number of people, about 50%, said a top concern was crime, immigration, abortion policy, or gun policy. Trump was seen as better able to handle immigration. Harris, according to this poll, better on abortion and gun policy. About 25% of registered voters polled said the war between Israel and Gaza and how the U.S. was handling it was a top concern for them. On this, Trump and Harris were seen as evenly matched on whom could deal with Israel and Hamas. The leader of militant group Hezbollah vows retribution in response to the simultaneous explosions of dozens of personal communications devices in Lebanon. He blamed Israel for the attack, saying it broke all conventions and laws and red lines, but the country has not claimed responsibility. The seemingly coordinated attack began on Tuesday when pagers carried by hundreds of Hezbollah fighters exploded in civilian areas like grocery stores and sidewalks. The next day, even more blasts were reported, this time from two-way radios. More than 30 people have been killed as a result of the explosions and thousands more injured. Hezbollah began using the devices instead of cell phones to protect communications. Security analysts believe explosives were planted in the devices before they ever made it into the hands of Hezbollah members. Israel and Lebanon have exchanged near daily fire since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th last year, but the clashes have intensified in recent months. Pope Francis is still rejoicing in the aftermath of his trip to Southeast Asia. Commenting on his experience, he marveled at how alive the church is there compared to much of Europe. He shared his reflections during his weekly audience on Wednesday.
A first reflection that naturally arises after this trip is that in thinking about the church, we are still too Eurocentric, or as they say, Western. But in reality, the church is much bigger than the Rome of Europe, much bigger and also, I would say, much more alive in those countries.
The Pope's comments came less than a week after he completed his marathon apostolic journey throughout Southeast Asia. He expressed gratitude for the evangelization efforts of the missionaries and catechists he encountered during his stops in Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, East Timor, and Singapore. The 12-day trip was the longest the 87-year-old Pope has taken during his pontificate. He expressed his gratitude to God for allowing him to do as an elderly pope what he wished to do as a young Jesuit. And in Naples, Italy, a centuries-old miracle takes place once again. The dried blood of Saint Januarius, a 4th century bishop and martyr, liquefied on Thursday. The blood, which is kept in a glass vial, liquefied before a holy mass in honor of his feast day. This liquefaction has taken place since the 14th century and typically happens 3 times a year. Despite numerous tests, there is no scientific explanation for the liquefaction. We'll be right back.
Thousands of worshipers from the Brazilian community flock to Washington to celebrate their spiritual mother's new home in North America's largest Catholic church. Our Lady of Aparecida's homecoming in our nation's capital, next.
Hello, Journey Home family. Next time, we'll welcome Everett Franklin, a former Church of God military chaplain, to share what led him home to the Catholic Church. Share the journey next time on EWTN's The Journey Home.
Many countries have their own images and titles for our Blessed Mother, and Brazil is no different. In the year 1717, before Brazil was even an independent nation, 3 fishermen pulled a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary from the water in their nets. After asking for her intercession, they were then blessed with an abundance of fish. Since then, Nossa Senhora Aparecida, Portuguese for Our Lady the Appeared, has become not just Brazil's spiritual mother, but a historic and cultural icon. And now, Our Lady has found a home in the United States, in our nation's capital.
What does it mean for you to have Lady Aparecida here?
Wow, you want to make me cry? It means a lot for our faith, for our devotion.
The Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. is the largest Catholic church in North America. Throughout its grand interior, you'll find more than 80 Marian chapels, hosting icons and images of our Blessed Mother from around the world. Mexico to France, Lebanon to Vietnam, all these nations have a place at the Basilica. And now, Brazil, the country with the largest number of Catholics in the world, has a home here too.
Nossa Senhora Aparecida.
Our Lady Aparecida, here are your people.
Last weekend, thousands of pilgrims from Massachusetts and Florida, as far as California, and even from Brazil, traveled to Washington for a historic event, the enthronement of Nossa Senhora Aparecida. the patroness of Brazil, at the Basilica. This small image of our Blessed Mother has shaped Brazil's culture and history, inspiring the largest Marian shrine in the world and a national holiday. Dr. Julia de Mello, professor and vice provost of global strategies at the Catholic University of America, explains that Aparecida goes beyond religion and is woven into Brazil's culture.
It's hard to explain unless you have lived there and you have seen this on your own, and how powerful she is, and people devote their lives to her.
Dr. de Mello has been leading the effort to enthrone Our Lady Aparecida in the Basilica for more than 2 years. She was told that there was not any more space for Marian images.
He gave the same answers he gave to the community, saying that there was no space, that we're not doing enthronements, that this is not going to happen. I could not believe a place that big would not have a little corner for Aparecida with a small little image, right?
The rector explained that all chapels in the Basilica are funded by donors or orders and not open for other images, except for 2.
That's when he identified the Fatima chapel at the very beginning at the very entrance of the Basilica as one of the places that the Basilica has control. So I told him, that's it. She's going to be right in front of Fatima, and they will speak Portuguese all day.
Thanks to the leadership of Dr. de Mello and Bishop Edgar de Cunha of the Diocese of Fall River, Massachusetts, the Brazilian community could finally have its spot in the Basilica.
For years, people who visit this shrine would ask, but we have so many other Our Lady of so many other countries, so many other titles, but there is no Our Lady of Aparecida here. Now, no one can say that because she's here.
Nossa Senhora's enthronement was a day full of celebration and joy as dozens of parishes and church groups gather to honor their Blessed Mother. In the morning, pilgrims walked to the Basilica with an image of Aparecida, waving white handkerchiefs as a sign of peace and devotion to Our Lady. That afternoon, it was standing room only for Our Lady's Enthronement Mass. Cardinal Sean O'Malley of Boston, who served as the Episcopal sponsor for the project and donated his statue of Aparecida for the oratory, celebrated the Mass in Portuguese with dozens of other cardinals, bishops, and priests.
Isto é o meu corpo que será entregue por vós.
Pilgrims processed in with an image of Our Lady Aparecida, along with a fishing net, a reminder of the poor fishermen she appeared to. The Mass concluded with the unveiling of the oratory of Our Lady Aparecida, enthroned for all visitors to the Basilica to venerate and honor.
Que viva Nossa Senhora Aparecida!
When speaking to pilgrims, their love for Our Lady Aparecida shines through.
This morning when I came in with the procession and the band started singing to her, I just started crying.
This is our place now. We come back. We are from Boston, but we come. It's 8 hours for coming in a bus, and we come back. Always now. It's our place now.
Pilgrim Stephanie Gomes says all Catholics can learn something from the patroness of Brazil.
I think in every little apparition, Mother Mary leaves a little puzzle piece of who she is, you know, and I think you can put all these apparitions and the things that she tried to show about herself and God, and each of these apparitions you can use that to piece together for like a full image of like who Mother Mary is and who she wants to be for us and who the God that she's trying to introduce us to is as well.
Our Lady of Aparecida, pray for us. Thank you for joining us. For EWTN News in Depth, I'm Catherine Hadro. We hope to see you again same time next week for more news and stories important to your Catholic life. Until then, God bless.
We're in a pivotal moment. The world is in tremendous need as society is sharply divided along political and ideological lines. As the elections draw near, this is becoming more apparent. That's where EWTN News steps in. Unlike other media outlets, we're grounded in truth, not the changing ideas of the world. We frame our stories and commentary on the rock of the gospel. And we work hard daily to ensure we provide high-quality news you can trust. This coverage is possible because people like you have stepped forward. With the support of you, our EWTN family, we've opened a new studio in Washington and hired more journalists and producers. With these additions, we're expanding our coverage this election cycle, including extended election night coverage, national and statewide polling, and a voter's guide. But there's more work to be done. So today, I ask for two favors. Will you join us to pray for the nation, that we all understand we are one nation under God? Also, will you make a gift so we can share news with more people? Your support will advance the truth worldwide. Thank you, and may God bless you.
EWTN is 100% viewer supported. Your gift today helps keep EWTN on the air, shares the joy of the gospel, and helps broadcast news from a Catholic perspective. Please make a gift by going to EWTN.com/PrayUSA. You may also call us at 1-800-447-EWTN or send your donation to EWTN, 5817 Old Leeds Road, Irondale, Alabama, 35210.
I'm Tracy Sable. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, the race to the White House. With 45 days left until the election, Kamala Harris hits Georgia with a speech focused on abortion as Donald Trump attempts to court the Jewish vote. Civilian casualties as Hezbollah fires rockets and Israel conducts airstrikes. Hundreds of innocent people are caught in the crossfire. Political firestorm as candidates continue to spread debunked rumors about Haitians eating pets. Life is anything but normal in Springfield, Ohio. The impact on residents. And on the road again, we preview the Holy Father's upcoming trip to Belgium and Luxembourg. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us. Our top story tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris makes abortion the main focus of her campaign today, just hours after discussing the same issue with Oprah. That former President Donald Trump makes headlines for telling a Jewish audience they could be responsible if he doesn't win the election. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Tracy, several things to get to tonight. First, the White House held a cabinet meeting today. Also, Vice President Harris joined virtually so she could hit the campaign trail. Donald Trump, meanwhile, heads to North Carolina for a rally this weekend. And in-person voting for this year's presidential election has begun, kicking off the 6-week sprint to Election Day.
Vice President Kamala Harris leaves Washington, D.C. for a trip to Georgia. Today's campaign stop focused squarely on abortion.
Women who are also being made to feel as though they did something wrong. The judgment factor here is outrageous.
Harris also railed against pro-life laws Thursday night during an event with Oprah.
Certain people who are in these state houses, and then starting with the former president of the United States, think they're in a better position than a doctor or a nurse to determine when their patient needs medical care.
Pro-life groups continue to challenge Harris